morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. It's Monday morning, September 23rd. I had to check my calendar, 2019. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today, and I hope you had an awesome weekend. So you've probably heard the saying, like I have many times, or maybe seen a meme posted on social media basically saying 1984 wasn't supposed to be an owner's manual, basically referencing the notion that the surveillance state that we have today is at least as bad, if not significantly worse, than Orwell's Big Brother in the famous book. But the thing is, you'll never, ever hear anybody. I mean, you and I probably won't. I know they exist. But you'll really probably never hear anybody saying, you know, I love that surveillance state. I love that Big Brother. I'm totally on board with that entire society. No one seems to support that in particular, but it didn't go from zero surveillance to Orwell's 1984 in just one blink. It didn't happen in one moment. It probably went step by step, as do virtually all systems of totalitarian control. So most people today who would say that they oppose this Big Brother system actually are supporting the foundational building blocks to actually create it, or to have created it already here in this country. So whether it's one program or another, a lot of people are giving it enough support to chip away at our liberty until it's virtually gone. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I also, if I have some time, want to talk about some ways to chip away, or some efforts that are currently underway since we're closing in on the next nullification season for 2020. Some efforts that we're tracking already this year and going into next to chip away at that Big Brother surveillance state. First of all, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. We broadcast through our channels over at YouTube, DLive, Twitch, Periscope, and Facebook. We also have archived video versions on BitChute and Brighteon.com. Both seem to be pretty censorship resistant, so I'm happy to put the archives up on those video platforms, and we seem to be picking up a little bit of reach over there as well. We also have a podcast edition that we put over on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and elsewhere. You can find all of the archives of our show, all the ways to follow us. You can leave reviews, etc., through all the links. You can support us financially over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty is where to keep up to date on this show. I will be improving that landing page over time. Currently, it just shows the most current episode at the top, plus all the links next to it of where we actually have archives and live broadcasts, and then the archive, you just kind of scroll through them. I want to add a search feature and some categories and things like that now that we're really covering a lot of topics. Anyways, before getting into the episode, I want to take a look over at the live chat, see who's joining me this morning. Tyler B., good luck to you before your surgery this week. I hope it goes well. You said it was number 25. That's incredible. Hi to Larry Diglio, Ethan Mack, Patricia Dance, good to see you, and I appreciate you commenting over on our IGTV post when we post excerpts of the show on Instagram as well. Thanks, Patricia. Austrian Watchman, good to see you. Essential Freedom, taking a look as well. Rick Gaston, Shane Lackey, Connor Greenwald, Dan Reed says, I would say hi, but the government already knows I'm here. Yeah, we all laugh about that, but certainly, and hi to Ron Holiday as well, certainly there is something to be said about that. We all say that as a joke, but many times we'll also hear in casual conversation, oh, I don't want to post that online, or I don't want to say that in a text message because, you know who might be listening. And sometimes people say that jokingly, but there are many times where people actually do restrict how they act, restrict what they stand up for because of the fear of being monitored all the time, not wanting to be on a list. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a good guy, you are definitely on a list. Now, whether they are using that list against you at some point is another question. But you really need to be on a list of something because the bad guys don't like liberty. I also want to say hi to Nicole Williams, Jules Hamilton, Joe Spienza. And Ethan Max says, I don't violate anyone's rights or harm anyone. Awesome. I appreciate you guys joining me. Thank you. So let's get into this episode. I first want to talk about some of the things that are growing and growing as far as the surveillance state. And here, an interesting article. Here we go. I just kind of switched it around. From Mike Maharrey that we published recently, A Nightmarish Army of Unblinking Skies. And he writes this way. Most of the time, we hardly even notice the cameras. At some level, we may realize we're being recorded, but we figure no one will ever actually watch the footage. They collect too much of it. Even with cameras everywhere, we feel relatively safe in our anonymity. Wow. But how would you feel if you knew somebody was monitoring every camera pointed in your direction 24/7, scrutinizing every move, judging every action, noting whom you associate with, and scouring your facial expressions for signs of suspicious behavior? Mike notes that we are rapidly getting to that place. Not that we have individuals monitoring every single person a la 1984 Big Brother, but that AI is now being used, algorithms, artificial intelligence, they call them AI agents, that are scouring video footage every second of every day and flagging what they call suspicious behavior. And the thought police, who regard all kinds of things that support liberty as suspicious, right to keep and bear arms anyone, healthcare freedom anyone, privacy, just whatever it may be, are going to run that system in a way that determines what's flagged as suspicious. And there was a report from the ACLU, which does good work oftentimes on surveillance issues. They can be pretty bad on some other things, just like every organization, I guess. Someone's probably saying we're pretty bad on something here, but I'll disagree with that. They say what we found is that the capabilities that computer scientists are pursuing, if applied to surveillance and marketing, I'm less concerned about the marketing end because they're just trying to sell me stuff and I can say no or turn on an ad blocker. When government uses surveillance, they're using it as a tool to deny you liberty. They use it as a tool to, like, no fly, no buy, that type of thing, no due process. It would create a world of frighteningly perceptive and insightful computer watchers monitoring our lives. Cameras that collect and store video just in case it is needed are being transformed into devices that actively watch us, often in real time. It is as if a great surveillance machine has been growing up around us, but largely dumb and inert, and is now, in a meaningful sense, waking up. And Maharrey puts it this way. George Orwell's Big Brother would drool over the all-encompassing surveillance system quietly under construction in the U.S., cameras equipped with facial recognition, monitored by AI agents, linked to federal, state, and local databases, can track your every move just by pointing a camera at your face. It effectively turns each of us into a suspect standing in a perpetual lineup. And he's referencing primarily facial recognition, which they can put in all kinds of locations, whether it's cameras on drones or at check-ins to the airport or whatever it may be. They want to use them in sports stadiums. They use them in Home Depot. And the thing is, once they collect that information, they're sharing it with everybody through fusion centers, through information sharing environment, to all local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. And who knows if they're sharing it with the British government, etc. You can create a profile on people based on where they go, who they associate, what they buy, what they're writing, what they're talking about. And sooner or later, you have a pretty good idea of what's going on. When I go to Amazon.com, which is not very often anymore, I am really weaning myself off of them because of their support for the surveillance state and their participation in it. And I've been replacing purchases that I would normally make at Amazon with other companies as often as possible. Petco, for example. I don't know if Petco does bad stuff, but I don't get my pet food for my parrots over at Amazon anymore. I even spend the same price somewhere else at Petco and get automated delivery because I just don't want to give them the money. So there are a few things that I still get at Amazon, I'm embarrassed to say, but I still am going to work my way out of it. But it's pretty dangerous, this kind of stuff. And they're sharing all this information everywhere. And that's the way Mike put it. They link federal, state, and local databases to track your every move. Going further, there's a new program coming out in Baltimore. That is a partnership, of course, between the DHS and local police. They're going to push a 3-year plan to use police surveillance planes to monitor the public. And this was a blog that we ran last week by a guy named J. Private Eye that does really great work on this stuff. Again, the link to this is in the show notes. And he puts it this way: in what can only be described as one of the most audacious fallacies to come out of post 9/11, our law enforcement claims that spying on everyone makes people happier. Just keep repeating that propaganda. You'll probably hear some people say it. And I'm going to get into some comments that we hear from people in support of the surveillance state shortly. The governor's letter, he writes, revealed how police are using the Baltimore Community Support Program. Community Support Program means violate your liberty at all times. It helps make the community a safer and happier place to live, work, and play. That's their marketing message. He goes on, he says, last year I reported that officials in Riverhead, New York also claimed that police drones and cameras would, quote, uplift downtown. And that is exactly what we see happening in Baltimore. The police put it this way: our vision is a safer, happier, and more enjoyable Baltimore. We hope to contribute to a safe environment and a respectful community where people feel safe to live, work, and play. But this is the notion that you have to have persistent, constant government surveillance, watchful eyes over you to be safe and happy. If you combine that with the idea that people have been basically trained out of the idea of self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms is seen as a bad thing, this is why people are so desperate to be protected. They're living in fear at all times. He goes on, the governor's letter revealed one more disturbing tidbit of information. It is a partnership with the Baltimore Police Department and DHS. They work together on perfecting how to best monitor everyone. It's called the Government's Office of Crime Patrol and Prevention, GOCCP. And I just added this one tidbit. He says, one cannot help notice but how eerily similar the GOCCP is to the CCCP, the Russian abbreviation for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I mean, think of all these guys that ran that country: Khrushchev, Stalin, Brezhnev, and the rest. A totalitarian society loves knowing everything about the people because they love knowing if there's any opposition that needs to be crushed. And even if the United States federal government, the central government, the largest government in the history of the world, the largest military empire in the history of the world, isn't doing that to you today, does not mean that they have not built up the capabilities to do it. And as soon as they have the capability, someone is eventually going to use that in a way that's really, really dangerous. Meharry goes on in another article that we published just yesterday, Surveillance, You Better Choose Wisely, with that same line about Orwell. He says, I've often joked that Orwell's novel 1984 was meant to be a warning, not an instruction manual, and yet every day the U.S. marches closer and closer to making Orwell's dystopian nightmare a reality. Nobody wants this. No one, none of us here would ever just say we would love to have a surveillance state. It just doesn't happen. He says, so why is this still happening? He says, because too many people do want the intermediate steps that necessarily lead to Orwell's vision. And he goes on basically talking about the story that I was basically mentioning, that, Orwell, Big Brother didn't happen overnight. He says Orwell's fictional world at some point in the past probably would have looked a lot like ours. Big Brother wasn't watching every citizen's every moves. There weren't cameras on every corner and microphones in every building. It wasn't like the people of that society woke up one day and found Big Brother peeping into their living rooms. Step by step, over time, society and government evolved into the totalitarian surveillance state we experience in the novel. I would say it's much worse than that today. If you add our phones into the mix, their ability to watch us in so many different ways beyond the technology that was thought of in 1948 when Orwell wrote this stuff. He says, Mike points out, the problem is that a lot of people are perfectly fine with the incremental steps that eventually lead to that point. And he goes through a list. And I see over in the live chat on Facebook, Joseph Dale Allen says, government is not the answer. So when people are fearful of one thing or another and they keep looking to government to protect us, what they're doing is they're giving government more power to dominate us in the future. What power you give government today to protect you supposedly against some bad guys or some violation of your rights today because you, well, maybe not, whatever power you give government today is going to be used by someone in a way that you don't want it to be used in the future. That's a fact. He says he gives a list of things. They want ICE to use facial recognition to ferret out illegal immigrants. They use like a 100-mile constitution-free zone. They're using mass surveillance through facial recognition across the southern border. They want the NSA to vacuum up cell phone calls and emails to protect them from the terrorists. They want police to use stingray devices, and I would say ALPRs, and drones to track down dangerous criminals and drug dealers. After all, we've all heard the saying, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. But I guarantee you, and I've looked through a lot of it, not all of it yet, but if you look through the ratification era debates, the discussions from the founders, there was never a concern about people who wanted something to hide. If you were hiding something, you must be dangerous. That's the mentality. It's flipped around. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Those of you who are hiding something, well, you should be scared because you're problematic. No founder ever held the view that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And Mike points out that this is exactly how we get to an Orwellian surveillance state. Tom Norman says we need government like fish need bicycles. That's a really, really good way to put it. And the result of this, as Heather Rossi says over on YouTube, is oppression is the result. So each step becomes worse and worse and worse. And sooner or later, you wake up and then you're saying, well, how did they get this power? Today, they already have the power to do all kinds of crazy stuff that we see in future dystopian sci-fi films. It's just that they haven't done it yet. That doesn't mean that the current president or the previous one or the one before that or the next one have any been good on the Constitution. They're all absolutely terrible. It's just that they haven't gone that far, or there hasn't been a convenient reason to scare enough people into a frenzy to allow this. And Mike points out something very important as well. A guy that I cite really often, John Dickinson. He was known as the penman of the Revolution. He wrote the phrase Concordia res parve crescunt, which is on all of our membership cards. I wish I had one handy here. But it means small things grow great by concord. This was from letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania in 1767 and 1768. And he points out another section. He said that Dickinson warned about the gradual step-by-step encroachment of government power. I think this is letter 7. I'm probably wrong, but I'm just off the top of my head. But he's got a link to it. And, of course, the link is in the show notes over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. And here's the quote from Dickinson that I think is really important. All artful rulers who strive to extend their power beyond its just limits endeavor to give their attempts as much semblance of legality as possible. No one who talks about mass surveillance by stingray device or by facial recognition or drones, no one who talks about red flag laws or stopping due process or the TSA, they never talk about it by saying, you know, we realize this goes beyond the Fourth Amendment. We realize this violates the Constitution or the Second Amendment or the 10th Amendment or whatever amendment or whatever part of the Constitution. We know this violates it, and I'm in favor of that anyways. I'm totally on board, but it's just so necessary because of whatever situation. No one ever says that. These artful rulers and their supporters in the media, online, and in the grassroots will parrot. And I shouldn't say parrot because that sounds negative, and I have 2 of them. Speaking of buying pet food. But Artful rulers, as Dickinson knew back in 1767, they will always make an excuse claiming that it's legal. You don't have an expectation of privacy in public. We can scan your face and store its image and match it whenever we want because we have to catch the terrorists. That's what they tell us. Dickinson goes on, he says, those who succeed them may venture to go a little further. So once you have one artful ruler making an excuse to expand government power on one issue, the next one is going to use that as a baseline. No government official, no ruler, no politician ever looks at the power handed to them by the previous administration or a previous government or a previous Congress or Parliament or anything. This is a universal maxim in my view. No politician ever looks at the power handed to them as the top limit of what they're allowed to do. They look at it as a baseline, and they continue chipping away and increasing that power in their term in office. He says, for each new encroachment, Dickinson writes, will be strengthened by a former. That which is now supported by examples growing old will become an example itself, and thus support fresh usurpation. And usurpation is a theft of power. This is stealing something that doesn't belong to them. And government does that all the time. Remember, I mentioned I did an episode for September 11th, 9/11. Fear is the foundation of most governments. It was focused on this quote from 1776, a letter from John Adams' thoughts on government, back when Adams was awesome. He wrote, quote, fear is the foundation of most governments, but is so sordid and brutal a passion, and renders men in whose breasts it predominates so stupid and miserable that this is the first part he's awesome on. We know fear is the foundation of most governments. They use fear to expand their own power. They use fear to drive the population, to allow them to do stuff. And fear makes human beings stupid and miserable. So when we are afraid of something, rather than strong, united, independent, whatever may be best for us, but whenever we're not fearful, we're much clearer in our thoughts. But when we're scared of whatever it may be, then it makes us dumb and miserable. Stupid and miserable, according to John Adams. He was wrong where he says Americans will not likely approve of any political institution which is founded on fear. I think almost the entire system today is founded on fear. Fear of people dying without health care. Millions were going to die in the streets if we didn't have Obamacare. Millions are going to die in the streets if we don't have a huge military empire. Millions are going to die if they don't have a drug war or surveillance or gun control. So we're always living in fear. And if it's not our particular fear, it's someone else's. And there are a lot of people out there who live in that fear all the time. I do want to point out a few examples of some comments that we see all the time. It's not just once in a while. These are repeated almost constantly. I created a few slides here. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Hopefully my audio's still working. Here's an example from Hawk in Springfield talking about a proposed facial recognition in Springfield, Massachusetts. Says, quote, this is a non-issue. If you are not a criminal, why would you be against it? This is a very common mentality when it comes to surveillance. It's almost pervasive in Republican circles. We hear this all the time from people on the right for some reason. People who want limited government on the one hand, or claim to, seem to be in favor of a massive police state as long as you aren't violating laws. But the fact of the matter is, most laws on the books shouldn't even be laws. So if you're not a criminal, that means you're just not violating the laws that government has created, most of which shouldn't exist in the first place. And so it becomes a more and more narrow situation on what you would not be afraid of. Because in order to be a non-criminal, and there's a book out there that says 3 crimes a day, almost all of us just commit 3 crimes at some point. Whether we are a convicted criminal or doing criminal activity beyond that is another question. But if it's based off of government laws, then this is a really absurd statement. It's dangerous, too, because it empowers more and more government. Another one from the right. Leftist morons, but I'm being redundant. And maybe all the people on the left, I'm not a collectivist. So I look at people as individuals. And anyone who says all liberals, all Democrats, all conservatives, all Trump supporters are idiots or wrong or evil, they're part of the problem. Those individuals who say that are a serious part of the problem because they're lumping everyone in together. And that's the way that I think the powers that be want things. They want us all fighting amongst each other, putting each other into different boxes while they continue to steal, usurp our money and all the power that they should never have. And if you think that standing up for privacy makes you a leftist moron, you don't support the Constitution. This is one we hear all the time too. Here's a guy supporting a new policy in Detroit to use facial recognition, even though it was promised that they wouldn't. Thank you, Chief James Craig, for finally convincing the police commission to approve FRT, facial recognition technology. Undoubtedly, FRT will be an important tool in the DPD's efforts to identify and arrest criminals. Thomas E. Page in Detroit. They're so concerned about crime. Well, that means we have to violate everyone's rights, not have probable cause, and just have surveillance of every single person at all times. Here's another person. For me, 235, so many people hide behind a keyboard and promote this propaganda garbage. For me, it doesn't matter. I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to hide while I'm in public. Well, in the future, idiot, someone is going to think that what you are doing is wrong. And maybe they think what you're doing is wrong at home. Maybe they don't like your relationship choice. Maybe they don't like what you own or grow or eat or what you don't do. And they want you to do something different with your life. Sooner or later, all this facial recognition, all these drones, all these cameras will be monitoring you, and someone will use that power in a way that you don't like. But people are so willing to just throw away liberty like this because they're the good guy, or they're too weak to actually stand for anything. They're not violating any laws because whatever the government does is okay. These are the submissive slaves that are driving us into a totalitarian state. And there's always somebody who posts a comment when you talk about stopping facial recognition or any type of mass surveillance tool. They come up with some crazy scenario that almost never happens, that we have to somehow support mass warrantless surveillance at all time of everyone, no matter what, without being based on a probable cause, no warrants, no nothing, because of some crazy scenario that might happen. Like this one. If you knew somebody in a sports event was going to kill you with a gun, because that happens all the time, right? Would you rather have the police use facial recognition or give the police a picture of the killer and hope that the police would have time to find him before he found you? Now, I would love to think that these are all government trolls. This is a Russian troll farm trying to drive us into our own self-oppression. But the amount of times that people get likes on these things, and I honestly believe that there may be some propaganda coming in from government agencies here in the U.S. to drive this type of opinion. That's what they do when they want to overthrow a system of government, which I think in many ways has already been accomplished internally here in the U.S. This is not the republic that was created under the Constitution. And maybe there are some paid trolls, paid troll farms, government agents pushing this propaganda. But a lot of people repeat this. We've seen the same thing for years and years and years. And my experience tells me a lot of it is a legitimate view. It's just that it's totally wrong. It's illegitimate in that it's dangerous, but it's legitimate that it comes from real people. Looking over at the live chat, a lot of interesting back and forth. Austrian Watchman, good point. Every law must be analyzed to see how it can and most likely will be abused in the future. We always have to think about that. And that's the way the founders taught us to look at things, not how someone might use the power immediately. And in fact, we were warned against thinking just in the short term. I've often cited George Washington's farewell address, which was the anniversary was just last week on the 19th, last week, Thursday. And what I focused on last year's anniversary was primarily talking about turning a blind eye to something because it might seem good in the short term. So you might be okay with government doing surveillance on everybody because you're afraid of terrorists in Afghanistan, or you think the people of Iran are out to get you. I mean, you're stupid if you think that. But let's say you do. The problem is if you turn a blind eye, and Washington warned us, he said, let there be no change by usurpation, because this is the customary way by which free governments are destroyed. Even if you like the results, and I'm paraphrasing what Washington said, even if you like the short-term results or you support the team in charge, eventually someone's going to use that power in the future against you. We've known this all along. The late great Harry Browne always said government knows how to do one thing great. It breaks your legs and comes in and figures out how to fix it. I do have a couple of quick examples of chipping away the other direction that I wanted to just give a report on. First of all, this is primarily on facial recognition. First of all, in Oakland, the city council just last week, by unanimous approval, became the third city in the country to ban facial recognition by government. They're just not going to use it anywhere. Police, body cameras, subway stations, anywhere. They cannot use it. They cannot access it. They can't even purchase it. So they joined San Francisco and Somerville, Mass. And maybe this is why some people on the right don't like it. They see these leftist towns, these blue state cities like San Francisco and Oakland, and they say, well, it must be bad. And that's how they get you. They think that just because someone is on the left, or you've got a leftist city, then everything they do is bad. So once they start supporting privacy, then now privacy is a bad thing too. And the vice versa. You know, I've often said to friends, like, the best way to get the left to start supporting the right to keep and bear arms is to have Trump come out in favor of gun control. I mean, he's definitely doing that. Maybe he isn't being aggressive enough for the left to just oppose it on Trump grounds, or maybe that one's a bridge too far. But Oakland, the city council there banned facial recognition in totality, completely. In Portland, they're considering a ban on facial recognition technology. We reported this just last week, Thursday as well. There's going to be, they just had an initial hearing on it just last week, and there's going to be a follow-up sometime in November and a potential vote pretty soon. Here in California, Assembly Bill 1215, which I've talked about a few times, would ban facial recognition from police body cameras for 3 years. They made the mistake of making the argument, instead of that mass warrantless surveillance is wrong in and of itself, most of the organizations supporting this legislation focused only on the fact that facial recognition is really bad in correctly identifying people of color. So they focus primarily on the racial issue. So then what happens? Instead of having a total ban forever on this, which is what it should be, they reduced it to 7 years and then 3 years, giving them time to fix the technology. But it's a positive step, and some of the organizations, I think, recognize this and have a lot of work to do and are talking about that. That's on the governor's desk here in California. In Michigan, there's a proposal from Senator Jim Runestad with 27 co-sponsors, Senate Joint Resolution G, SJRG. It would add electronic data and electronic communications to the same level in the state constitution as persons, houses, papers, and effects. That's supposed to be coming up for hearing. I thought it was going to happen last week. Maybe it was delayed, but there should be a hearing on that in Michigan coming up very soon. And I think I already covered exactly what Mike wanted to say here from John Dickinson. One other quote that I pulled up that I thought was really, really appropriate is Thomas Jefferson. And this is a letter to Archibald Stuart on December 23rd, 1791. He says, quote, and I agree with this, I'm fully on board with this, I would rather be exposed to the inconveniencies. That's how he wrote it. It was originally, in the original draft of this, he wrote dangers. And then he crossed it off and he put, I think he meant inconveniences. I would rather be exposed to the inconveniences attending too much liberty than those attending too small a degree of it. Then it is important to strengthen the state governments. And as this cannot be done by any change in the federal constitution, it must be done by the states themselves, erecting such barriers at the constitutional line as cannot be surmounted either by themselves or the general government. So he wants too much liberty, and he wants the states to be able to create strong barriers against the federal government. we're working on that. We're working on it very hard today. You can see our annual report over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/report. That'll be updated in the next few months for this year. It's current through last year, but we see more efforts to reject, resist, and nullify federal acts across the board than we have had in any time in American history. We're still just barely scratching the surface, but our view is no matter how insurmountable the odds may be, we have to continue doing what's right. For us, it's the Constitution. Every issue, every time, no exceptions, and no excuses. Patricia Dance, I love those quotes. So do I. Absolutely. Frank I says, oh, they're talking about a 2019 gun ban. I know they're doing registration. Barr is pushing registration, which is not cool at all. We should expect more and more. I hope that even though on the right to keep and bear arms, when Obama was in office and pushing executive-level bans on ammunition and other things, we saw a lot of resistance on a state or a local level, a lot of efforts to push back and try to nullify. A lot of legislation introduced. A lot of Republicans are really bad on this issue, so they just pretend to grandstand and they like to file legislation but not really work it. But that went but it's good to rally people to the cause, to educate people that there are other opportunities. But unfortunately, as soon as Trump got in, the NRA-backed president, this almost dissipated completely. So hopefully people are starting to recognize that you cannot rely on one team over another, no matter what organization backs them in Washington, D.C., to protect our rights, whether it's our right to privacy, our right to keep and bear arms, our right to be left the hell alone, all of it. You cannot trust Washington, D.C. I don't trust the states either, but if the states and local communities and the federal government are all confused, bickering and fighting with each other like they do to us, the more that they do that with each other, the more that we can chip away and usurp or take back the power that belongs to us, the people. Anyways, I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope you found it educational. To me, it's a really irritating topic. I guess I'm giving you guys a trigger of mine. What drives me nuts is when people say things like, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. They're basically telling us, I don't give a damn about the Constitution. I support the boys in blue. I support every law on the books, and I'm on board with all government power, because as soon as government does it, I'm just going to follow whatever that law is. And there's ways to get rid of laws, like vote the bums out, because we know that never works, right? Anyways, I don't trust the big tech companies either, like Mike Widner says over on Facebook, and that's one we definitely don't trust, is Facebook. But what makes the tech companies problematic is that they are sharing the information with government. Again, they can drive me as much advertising as they want. Sometimes I actually am interested in seeing the ads. Sometimes I like learning about marketing, how other people are doing it. Sometimes they may know what I might want to purchase. But trying to get me to buy stuff isn't, because I still am in control of my own thoughts, is not coming to my home with a gun to force me to do something that violates my rights. And that's basically what government is doing to us every single day. Anyways, again, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope your week is off to an awesome start. I'm not sure what I'm going to cover yet on Wednesday and Friday, but if you've got ideas and some suggestions, feel free to email team@10thamendmentcenter.com. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, continue leaving comments, whether it's live or in the archives. Reviews over on iTunes really help a lot, so thank you for those of you who have been doing that the last few days. I'm very, very grateful. And of course, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. As little as $2 a month really goes a long way in this grassroots organization, TAC. Anyways, awesome having you join me today. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time here on the Path to Liberty.